Hi, my name is Adriane Schoen, but a lot of people know me as Ash. A. Schoen, Ash Own, and my initials used to be ASH at one point. Regardless, I've moved cities 19 times. I've lived in San Antonio a couple of times. This is my 4th time in Austin. Some were repeats, others like DC, where I went to high school and fell into punk rock by accident. I wanted to be a beatnik, but I was born far too late for that. But I had a black beret and wore black clothes and read Patti Smith and wrote poetry. And some gal at my school with her orange hair said, "Ooh, come to my house for lunch. I live across the street." Great. So she puts on some basement cassette tapes. "Want to fuck you?" I'm like, wow, okay. Here's another one. "Want to fuck you?" Okay, great. Do you listen to anything else? No, I'm a true punker. So I thought, well, I'm out because I play piano and flute, and I listen to The Who, and and my brother's father was turning me on to The Clash and Patti Smith and David Bowie and all these other bands that I'm like, no, I'm interested in the poetry of the lyrics and not merely the ga 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 ga. So that was the end. But then I ended up back in San Antonio where my dad had a gallery where the Butthole Surfers played one of their first gigs, which I learned about when I found a paper cockroach on the ground. I'm like, what's this? And my dad told me about how much he loved the band. So I ended up bartending, turning 18 behind the bar of Raw Power, and where all the Austin bands came through. Or the woman booking, Dee Dee Williams, you may know. She's the one that brought me up to Austin for one of the last Clubfoot shows, the Dicks, famously a little piglet, formaldehyde piglet was passed around, and the liver down the pants, underpants of Gary's nurse outfit. I thought, okay, performance art, I'm in. But by the time I moved up here, I already knew plenty of the bands, and I've been in bands that you've never heard of because we did nothing. All of our rehearsals devolved into parties. And though I did rehearse with Marching Plague at one point, and so at one point I'm working at the adult toy store Forbidden Fruit, and yes, and you're not allowed to say dildo, but you can sell them as big as your arm. And so at the time, Chris Gates and I, and our friend Mike Carroll were all living together. And it was pretty much the host house of all the bands coming through. And at any given moment, there was a endless parade of after-show parties and whatnot. So one of the nights that I got off work, it was my birthday, and also the night before Woodstock. So this is when Tales of Terror moved to Austin. I was greeted at my door by Lion from Tales of Terror, sadly no longer with us, but he had a blender of brown goo. And he's like, "Drink it!" I'm like, "Absolutely not. What's in it?" And he goes, "No, it doesn't matter. It's my special recipe. Just drink it." I'm like, "Tell me what's in it." He goes, "Well, I found some things in your fridge." I'm like, "My fridge?" Like, "No, nothing." He goes, "Yeah, there were some old mushrooms and some tomato." I'm like, "Yeah, no, not having it." So there were Tales of Terror, Tex and the Horseheads, Human, I don't even remember who else. But in the morning, I woke up to Texicala Jones sleeping in the bed between Chris and I'm like, "Oh, hello, good morning," and a banging on the door. was the funeral. We lived behind a funeral home, and the funeral director came over and said, could you please collect your friends from our bushes? Because we have a funeral coming in, and could you please? So we did that, but when I went back to DC, worked in a bar there after turning 21, working in a bar in LA. Whoops. And no one asked. And that was, it turned out to be a drug front bar. I didn't know. I thought it was rock and roll, you know, everybody's spreading around cocaine. But that's when I left LA the first time. But back in DC, I was working in this tiny bar called Asylum, where two young guys were talking about all these Austin punk bands. And I go, oh, Scratch Acid, yeah, let me tell you about the time that David Yao lit a fart, the first time I ever saw one. Lit. I didn't know, and every band they mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, I know them, or I knew them, and I'm like, oh my God, it sounds braggadocious, but you have to understand how tiny the scene was. And even in less than 300 people in San Antonio and Austin combined, then there were those tiny enclaves. So, anyway.